Hello and welcome back. I'm your friendly neighborhood technician. Today we have something a little newer and a little different. Today we have to replace the cam plug that's on the driver's side cylinder head on the back of it right there. So we're gonna have to take off the intake manifold. Yes, this is an M276 engine. We have to remove the intake manifold right here, and then we have to remove the vacuum pump, and then we can get all the way down to the cam plug that's way down there that's leaking. So let's get right to it. Before we do that, actually, make sure you hit subscribe, give me that thumbs up, and make sure you hit the notification icon so you get notifications when I post a new video. And if you could, go visit my merch shop. Don't make fun of anything that I have on there. Yes, I know there's some silly stuff on there, but if you could just go look at it, that'd be fantastic. So let's get to it. First thing you want to do, make sure you have your fender and bumper covers on so you don't scratch anything. Then you're going to want to remove your front engine cover here. Set this off to the side. Next, you're going to want to remove your air cleaner, which is right here. You're going to have to undo this clamp right here. You're going to have to take off this connector for the intake air temp sensor. You're going to have to remove this, or at least unclip this from right here so they can come out with it. And then you have one E10, and then you have another E10 right there, and it should just lift right out. Once you get this out of here, out of this boot, fold it outwards a little bit, comes right out. So once you have that unclipped, that done, that undone, now you can just pull it out and just lifts right up. Okay, here at the front of the intake manifold, there's a few things that we're going to need to disconnect. One, you're going to have to disconnect, there's a T20 right there. You're going to have to disconnect that. There's going to be an O-ring right here you're going to want to replace. Then this can just get pulled out a little bit. And then you're going to want to disconnect this vacuum line right here, and then you're going to want to disconnect this vacuum line right here and this pressure sensor right there. Now, when we get the intake manifold lifted up a little bit, it's going to give us more access to the throttle valve connector, which is way down there. You can get to it from down here, but it is a lot easier to get to it with the intake manifold lifted up. All right, next there's going to be a few connectors we got to remove or disconnect. There's a connector right here. Then down here, there's a connector right here on the passenger side of the rear of the intake manifold. Then all the way over here, there's going to be another one right here that we're going to have to disconnect right there. Okay, so what we're going to do next is, you see this vacuum line right here. This vacuum line actually goes back here and it branches off. So it goes to the front of the intake manifold right there. You can actually move this, but as you can see, it's kind of tight in there, so it's really hard to get to the actual connector back there for it. But you can see right here, this actually tees into it. So we're going to remove this line right here. We're going to disconnect this one that goes to the booster, the brake booster. And then right here, we're going to disconnect that because that goes into it also. So that line goes from the front, it tees right here, and then it goes back right there to the vacuum pump. So we're going to disconnect it from the vacuum pump, and we're going to disconnect this line right here, and then that whole line is going to come out with the intake manifold. Now what we're going to do is not 100% necessary, but I like doing it. You see how this line goes underneath this connector right here? I'm going to disconnect this connector because when you try to get this intake manifold up or down, you're going to want to get it straight down or straight up, and that right there is going to be in the way a little bit. Just might make life a little more difficult, or more difficult than it needs to be. So if you just remove the connector, just tuck it out of the way, now you can remove that straight up. Now there's a vacuum hose that goes to the vacuum pump underneath that vacuum line right there. You can see it's way down in there. You can see it right there, right here. You're going to want to disconnect that vacuum hose. Next, you're going to need a T20 for these right here. Just that one and that one. These two are dummy screws. There's no screw actually there. You can see right there, it's round. So you're going to remove that, then you're going to remove this V6 cover. And now you have two E10 bolts right there. There's one right there. And then there's going to be two E10 bolts back here. There's one through this hole, and then there's one through that hole. Okay, now that you have those four E10s loosened up right there, you can pull them out of there if you want, but you can also leave them in there. Now you're just going to lift up on the intake manifold, and it pops up. And you can see right here, that's disconnected. This is not going to come out with it. That's just going to stay with the engine, because that goes to the centrifuge cover that's all the way on the back side of the passenger side of the engine over there. And when you get it lifted up, then you can have more access to the connector for the throttle valve right there, and then you can disconnect it. You can see I've already disconnected it, but it gives you a little bit more room to get your hand into there. Then once you have it all disconnected and loosened, you can just lift it straight up and out. Okay, so here is the engine without the intake manifold, or at least the top half of the intake manifold. There's the bottom half of the intake manifold. You're gonna have 6 of these green seals. When you go back together, you're gonna wanna put these 6 green seals on the lower half of the intake manifold, and that's just what you're gonna do. So at this point, this actually gets you a few steps closer to doing a lot of different repairs. There's your high pressure pump over there. Underneath the high pressure pump that this goes to is your centrifuge cover over here, which is underneath, which is attached to this right here, and it's way underneath the high pressure pump. You're gonna have to remove the high pressure pump and the high pressure pump elbow, which is right there, to replace that centrifuge cover, because those can leak, those can go bad. Also, what happens is, how you know you need a centrifuge cover back there is if you hear a very, very loud squealing sound, almost like your belt, but it's not your belt, when the engine's at idle. And if you loosen up the oil cap right here, you notice that the squealing sound goes away. That's because the centrifuge cover has decided to eat itself, and it is now pulling vacuum, and the squealing sound you're hearing is vacuum actually entering from the front crank seal. So that's one way you're gonna need that, and that's about a 6-hour job to replace that centrifuge cover over there, because you will have to remove these lower sections of the intake manifold to get to it, because it's a lot easier to get to it from the back, and especially the high pressure pump and the elbow. And then you're gonna have to remove these lines right here, or at least loosen them, move them out of the way. And it's not the most fun job, but it's not too terrible either. Don't forget to always cover up openings, especially when those openings go into the engine. And there's your vacuum pump right there. So now we can actually remove the vacuum pump. The vacuum pump has a few bolts on it. It has 2 or 3 bolts on it. You can, if you have the new vacuum pump already, it's easy to see where the bolts are gonna go. Don't be misguided by some of these holes right here that don't have bolts going to them. There's gonna be 2 on this side and then 1 on this side. So as you can see way back here, there's that cam plug down there. That is causing the leak, and that's what we're gonna replace. You can see it's right back there. Then when you have all 3 bolts out, you can loosen it, twist it back and forth, push it towards the rear of the car, and then you can lift it up and out. Now that we have the vacuum pump out, we can get in there and clean properly with a rag and make sure we don't have any leaks or any residue from leaks. Once you have the vacuum pump out, also you're going to want to make sure you replace this O-ring right here. Okay, one note before throwing this thing back together, what you're going to do in the complete opposite way that you took it apart is, when I take these off, I like taking all these back. You're going to take all these back out because, like I said, you're going to want to mount these back on the lower intake manifold. And when you do that, you're going to have a bunch of oil residue and stuff like that. So you're going to want to clean all this out and make sure that everything is nice and clean. There's no dust, there's no oil, because you don't want to turn this back over. And then you're going to have some oil dripping down. It might lead to a burning smell or something like that. But I would suggest cleaning this out so there's no, you can see all this dirt and everything right there. So there's no dirt. And you're going to want to lightly lubricate this. So when you do turn this back over and you're setting it back down, it seals back on this nice and evenly, especially if you have these that are brand new and they're dry. You don't want to try to shove this intake manifold down, and because it might fight you, and then you might actually pull one of these off the lower intake manifold, and you don't want that, because then it's not going to seal, and then you're going to have check engine light and stuff like that. So that is how you take out the intake manifold and the vacuum pump. That's all I got for you today. Like I said, put it back together the exact opposite that you took it apart, and that's it. There's no specific torques. I mean, there's going to be a torque for the vacuum pump. It's 20 Newton meters, something like that. So it's not a lot of torque. And those little screws on top of that thing, not a lot of torque. So because you don't want to strip that, it's just plastic. So That's it. Thank you for watching, and make sure you give me that thumbs up, hit subscribe, and make sure you hit the notification icon so you get notifications when I post a new video. Thanks for watching.